I'd like you to turn to Joshua, the first chapter. We're going to start in the first verse. Joshua 1, starting in verse 1, it says, "And after the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord, it came to pass that the Lord spoke to Joshua, son of Nun, Moses' assistant, saying, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now therefore arise and go over this Jordan, you and all this people, to the land which I am giving to them, the children of Israel. In every place that the sole of your foot will tread upon, I have given you, as I said to Moses, from the wilderness and this Lebanon as far as the great river, the river Euphrates, all the land of the Hittites, to the great sea towards the going down of the sun, shall be your territory. No man shall be able to stand before you all the days of your life. As I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will not leave you nor forsake you. Be strong and of good courage, for to this people you will divide as an inheritance the land which I swore to their fathers to give them. Only be strong and of good courage, or very courageous, that you may observe to do according to the law which Moses my servant commanded you. Do not turn from it to the right hand or to the left, that you may prosper wherever you go. This book of the law shall not depart from your mouth, but you shall meditate in it day and night, that you may observe to do according to all that is written in it. For then you will make your way prosperous, and then you will have good success. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and of good courage. Do not be afraid nor dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go." It was kind of interesting, the title the Lord gave me. Okay, I've taken the first step. And my mind went to that thing. It says, every place that the sole of your feet will tread upon, I have given you, as I said to Moses. And I thought, one of the things that I've done, and you've heard me talking about this CNC machine that I bought. So yesterday I had it all set up and I decided I was going to make my first carving. I got the bit in. I did everything. I turned it on. The bit hit the holder and broke the bit. So I went back to the book and I said, oh, I see what I did wrong. So I put another bit in and turned it on, and it actually did what it was supposed to do. And the bit didn't break. But the thing is sometimes we take our first step. We get excited about something and we take a step and we go, well, that wasn't hard. I remember when we lived out on the farm, we used to have this black mud, and it would rain, and you would walk out through the field, and the mud would stick so tight to your shoe that you could actually step out of your boot, walk right out of your shoe or out of your boot. And the thing is we take the first step, and there we are, and we say that wasn't hard, so we take another step. And then we see the walls of Jericho. Then we see the army that's coming against us, or then we see something, and it's easy to take the steps when we take that first step and we go, wow, that wasn't hard. Be strong and of good courage. Every step that I give you, or every step you take, I'm going to give you. In the old King James it says, for everywhere you put your foot, I will give you. Well, that's easy. Well, Lord, I see the walls of Jericho there. I think this step is fine enough. This area where I'm standing, I think it's adequate. I think it supports me well. I don't need to move anymore. And how many Christians have been that way in their walk with Christ? God says, we're going to do something. This is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to promote. This is what we're going to do. And we take the one step, and then all of a sudden we kind of look around at some of the difficulties, some of the things that are going on, and we say, this is fine. We don't take the next step. And I remember a pastor in California, he was in Vacaville, and he said every pastor that had come to that church stayed 3 years. And after 3 years, they left. So he decided, he said it was always just a handful of people, hardly anybody, just there. And he said, so finally when it came his turn and he went to the church, he thought, I'm going to stay 4 years and see what happens. He stayed 4 years, and God brought a revival and began to fill the church up. It's that taking of the next step. You know, sometimes we get comfortable and we see the obstacles, and so we kind of feel comfortable. Well, this is good enough. You know, we came across the Jordan River. We've set up camp. You know, this is fine. After that bit broke, I could have said, well, this is stupid. This is a dumb machine. So I went and put another bit in it, and I'm going, okay, let's try this again. Do you realize that we wouldn't have a light bulb if Thomas Edison hadn't tried almost 2,000 times to make a light bulb? He went and he tried every type of glass object. He tried everything he could that would conduct electric, and the light would come on and it would blow the conductor, the thing that was going to make the light. And finally he realized he had to make a vacuum inside of the bulb, and he had to seal the bulb. And when he did and he hooked electric to it, it lit up. He made the first light bulbs, all the light bulbs that he needed to light up the New Year's Eve or New Year's Day display that they had in the city where he was, which was, I believe, Philadelphia. Hershey chocolate. How many likes chocolate? Hershey chocolate. We went and did a tour through Hershey and Hershey chocolate. And Hershey chocolate went, and he went bankrupt 7 times. He started into chocolate, and he went and stopped. He started into chocolate, and he stopped. On the 8th time, the English liked caramels with their tea, and they sent the caramels over to the States, and Hershey dipped them into chocolate and sent them back over. And that was the thing that took Hershey from losing again and going strong. He said, this, you got to understand something. We're going to give you some land, Joshua. This land is going to go from the Great River in the south to the Lebanon. And it's going to go from the Great Sea to the Euphrates River. And there's only one king who ever fully owned all that land, and it was King David. And Solomon lost a lot of it. But he says, I'm going to give you this land. Understand something, Joshua. I'm going to be with you, and you're going to see great things. But you got to get past the first step. You can't look at the obstacles. You can't look at the things that are in front of you. You can't look at the things ahead, because if you do, you're going to be comfortable with the first step. Hey, we had the first step. Here's where we are. You know, we all go through different things. Think of the first thing you baked, Cindy. No one has ever really found out, I don't think, really, to what happened to Mom's first pie. No. Dad used to always talk about Mom's first pie, but no one would ever tell us what she did wrong or what happened. But the thing is this, is the whole deal is that if we look at things in our lives, think of the first dress, Cindy, that you sewed. Yeah. Think of the first day at nursing, Donna. The first time you had to give a bath. First carburetor I worked on. First time I did brakes. My dad hated me working on things because I would tighten things too tight and a lot of times break bolts. Then he started teaching me how to take the bolts out. So if I broke them, Tim, I was the one who had to take them out. The first step, the first thing that you've ever done, the first thing that you ever occupied, the first thing that ever happened. And he said here, he said, you've got to take it. Every place you put your step, I'm going to give it to you. Don't look at the obstacles. Don't look at the Hittites, and don't look at all the people that are in the land. Keep your eye on me, because what I'm going to do is each time you take a step, anything that's in front of you that's a hindrance, I'm going to help you take care of. I love the one verse. I keep thinking about it because both in David, and I've been looking through the Word of God to find if there's other places, but it says, and Joshua went out to fight and God went with him. And God went with him. And it says, and God killed more than Joshua did. God did more damage in the enemy than Joshua did. But here I can just see it now. Here's Joshua going out and leading the charge, and here's God up in the heavenlies going, okay, boys, let's go. Leading the charge from the heavenlies, and here comes not just a little dinky army of Israelites. Here comes the army of the Israelites and the armies of heaven, and they go in and wipe out. We come up against obstacles in our step, as we keep walking. And as we keep doing it, what happens is God comes with us and begins to fight with us. People say, well, I shouldn't have this problem anymore. God put some things there so you would fight. And then what he does is he fights with you. I always think of Jonathan and his armor bearer. It said they stood back to back, and one knocked him down and the other one slew him. And they killed a whole garrison of Philistines. The deal is that we take that first step, and man, it feels good. Now comes the next step. My mother said that I was one that I could walk, but I liked crawling because I could move quicker. And maybe all of us kids are that way. All of us are that way. We like crawling because we can move quicker. When you're walking, you got to keep a balance, and you got you got to keep equilibrium and balance, and you got to learn how to balance on one foot while you're putting the other foot forward. It's easy. But here we are, we're making that first step, and that first step gets us closer to our goal. In 1 Samuel, th chapter. Starting in the 31st verse, it says, now when the words of David, which David spoke, were heard, they reported them to Saul, and he sent for him. Now David said to Saul, let no man's heart fail because of him, for your servant will go and fight this Philistine. And Saul said to David, you are not able to go up against this Philistine to fight with him, for you are a youth, and he is a man of war from his youth. But David said, your servant used to keep his father's sheep, and when a lion and a bear came and took a lamb out of the flock, I went out after it and struck it and delivered the lamb from its mouth. And when it arose against me, I caught it by the beard and struck it and killed it. Your servant killed both the lion and the bear, And this uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, seeing he has defied the armies of the living God. Moreover, David said, the Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will deliver me from the hands of this Philistine. And Saul said to David, go, and the Lord be with you. You know, David's up on a hill looking down into the valley. This giant don't look real... We look up in the sky and we see what the astrologists tell us is Venus. Now, Venus is a pretty good sized planet. Or sometimes we can see Jupiter. And these are pretty good sized planets. Some of these planets have multiple moons. And when we're looking at it from this distance, it only looks like one of those glittery spots on Sister Cindy's sweater. Looks like we could go up there. Have you ever thought about David going out there? He knows what he said and he knows God can do it, but he sits there and he looks at that giant. Now up from the hill he looks small and he gets down there and he goes, what did I say? What have I bit off today? You know, you got to think of some of these things that are going through people's mind because it goes through our minds. I'm going to go out and do this. I'm going to go out and do that. And then all of a sudden we get out there and we look up and we're going, whoa. David reached in that bag and pulled out a stone. And I like what it says later on in the chapter. It says there in the 49th verse, it says, then David put his hand in the bag and took a stone, and he slung it and struck the Philistine in the forehead, and so that the stone sank into his forehead, and he fell on his face to the earth. And if you read the 50th verse, which I don't have here, but it says, and David killed the giant. Again, it's one of those things that we're ready to go and we make some big statements and all of a sudden we walk out there and we're going, God says, I got this. Every step you put your foot, I got it. How does it work with checkers? You go to the next space and if somebody occupies it, what do? You take them off. Take them off the board. God says, if you go to occupy a spot and the enemy's there, I'll take him off the board. You and I will work together and we will take him off the board. You know, the pawns, as they come out on chest and they move out there, they can only move a certain way. And if there's a rook in the way, it don't matter. The pawn's going to take the rook out. All of these things, they're all, you know, you say, well, you don't understand. But in life, everything that we're going through, everything that's happening, everything that you're going through, everything that's doing is there's things in our way. I ordered the CNC machine. I had nowhere to put it. So what was the first thing I had to do? I had to clean out a spot to put it. Yep. Once I got it there, I had to put it together. Once I put it together, then I had each step, each thing that we do, each thing requires some type of a response from us. Each thing that we do, when I got the lathe for my shop, I had to find a place to put it, and I put it, and I got it established. Each thing that we do, each, you know, down in my office, you know, we go through and I do certain types of things to edit the videos and things to get them out on YouTube, and each thing that I do, there's learning curves, there's learning things, there's obstacles in your way. How do I do this? How do I do that? And there's learning. Everything we do in life is that way. But it's interesting. When it's something that is for us, we don't have a problem bouncing through. When it's something for God, we have a tendency of going, this spot's good enough. right here, this spot's good enough. Donna would come to me and she says, I'm so tired of cooking the same thing. I'm so tired of cooking the same thing. Pretty soon she'll be looking through a magazine and I'll come in and she'll go, oh, I'm trying something different tonight. I hope you like it. To get us out of those things that were, to get us moving, it's great, but all of a sudden we stand in front of the giant and we look all the way up. Well, God, this is not a time that I hope you're gone. I made some big statements back there to Saul. I made some big things back there, and God, I like that. And he stuck that sling in the stone and he started twirling that thing around. And that stone, what was the song we used to sing, the little kids? We taught the little kids about David. It says, put a little sling into the stone into the sling, and the sling went round and round, and round and round and round and round and round, and one little stone went up through the air, and the giant came tumbling down. We teach the kids this thing, but the thing is when you're standing in front of the giant, you're going, God, will this giant ever come down? Put the stone in, it doesn't take anything big and monstrous. All it takes is just you using what you have, and you take the next step, and just like that little pond, when he takes the next step, he takes the rook or he takes the knight. In fact, he can even take the queen out if it's in such a position. He can even corner the king. But the whole deal is that we are in a position that we have to move forward. Another one in Matthew 26. Starting in the 31st verse. It says, Then saith Jesus unto them, All ye shall be offended because of me this night. For it is written, I will smite the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock shall be scattered abroad. But after I am risen again, I will go before you into Galilee. And Peter answered and said to him, Though all men shall be offended because of thee, yet I will never be offended. And Jesus said to him, Verily I say to thee, that this night before the cock crows you will deny that you know me. And Peter said to him, Though I should die with thee, yet I will not deny thee. And likewise also said all the other disciples. Die. There's nobody in this room that really wants to die. If we could live to 969 years like the oldest man in the world did, we'd like that. I remember Thomas, when we were over in the other building, he says, my mom can't die until I'm 99. Of course, I don't know how old that would have made her. But the whole deal is that we go through these things and we make big words. I'll die for you. Isn't it interesting? He's one of them. Oh, I don't know him. I don't know him. We're going forward. Whoops, there was a wall there. I guess we'll stay comfortable right here. Peter always had a big mouth and always got himself into trouble. And never could really, before the Holy Ghost, could never really back up what he said. That person is always getting excited about God and fizzles out. We have people that go to camp. They get so on fire for God, give them about a month back home, and it... Peter always was saying things. But when it came to standing in front of death, oh, I don't know him. I'm comfortable right where I'm at. I'm happy right here. But there's something that happened with Peter, and it said he went away and wept. How many times do you hear of Christians that they're excited and they're getting ready to move forward, and an obstacle comes in front of them and it stops them, and when it stops them they walk away and weep because they never really accomplished that God put in their heart? How many young men called to the ministry because of a pastor who wouldn't recognize it, or a pastor that wouldn't use them, or a pastor that said they weren't ready? No one's ever ready. I mean, look at Donna. Donna was 38 and I was 32. We're ready to get married. But you're never ready. Right, Sister Lorna? You're never ready. They call it the honeymoon, and then after the honeymoon, then you realize you're not ready. Then you realize you're not ready. And then you realize that it's kind of like that woman. Someone said, God sure gave you a beautiful garden. And she said, you should have seen it when he had it by himself. You know, you got this marriage and God's really giving you a good marriage. Well, you should have seen it before when he had it himself, you know. There's work. There's work. There's obstacles. There's things that go on. There's things that happen. Things you have to go back and repent for. Things you have to say, I'm sorry. Things you have to do. There's all kinds of things. But how many times do you go back and you weep bitterly? God says go. And you don't go. Then you sit down and you realize that what God had given you was exactly what they needed. And then you sit there and you weep bitterly because the obstacle looked too big. Another one, we're not going to turn to it because we know the story, Paul. The Bible says he goes into the house of Philip and he gets there and a man came in and he takes Paul's girdle and he wraps his hands and his feet and he says, the man that owns this girdle is going to be bound in Jerusalem. Paul says, what are you trying to do, make me cry? I'll not only go there and be bound, I'll die there if necessary. You know, again, we say big things. And God puts things in front of us. I wonder how much longer Paul's ministry might have lasted if Paul hadn't gone to Jerusalem. Now, because of him going there, he eventually ends up in front of Caesar, and he eventually ends up in front of the Roman Parliament and the government, and he's given a home there, and he ministers to people there, and so on and so forth. But you know, the thing is a lot of times we sit there And we make big, bold statements, and then all of a sudden we come in and we see the giant standing there. What is it that people say? There's an elephant in the room. And God says, go forward. But God, there's a wall there. I love what David said. By my God, I would jump over the wall, leap over the wall, run through the troops and leap over a wall. Run through a troop and I'll leap over the wall. By my God. He knew he couldn't do it. Joshua knew there was no way he could take Jericho. God says, I got a plan, Joshua. But you got to be willing to go forward. I got a plan. I got a plan. But you got to be willing to go forward. I've got an idea, but you've got to be willing to go. Oh, but God, I'm so comfortable on this spot of land. My foot treaded upon it. It's now mine. We brought all the children of Israel across the Jordan River. We're all in Canaan's land that flows with milk and honey. I can hear God saying, but you really haven't possessed the land. You really haven't thrown out the inhabitants. But God! Have you seen the size of the walls? Have you seen the I can almost hear Joshua in frustration. God says, go up to the wall, and up there he meets a warrior, and he says, God's got it. Joshua says, thank you. And back he comes. You know the times that you get defeated are the times you don't pray. That's what happened to Joshua at Ai. He got excited about Jerusalem and he takes off and man, he's going to town and boy, we're going to get this next one and it's a little one. We're just going to mow it under. Each step we take. My mind goes back to that movie, The Last Crusade. Only in the path of God will one prove his worth. God was Jehovah. And he had to jump on the letters to go across that thing or the floor would crumble underneath him and he would fall to his death. What happened? He stood on steps, started to step on one, and it broke through. And he goes, oh yes, in the Hebrew, Jehovah is spelled this way. Each step we take, we pray, God, which step? See, if Joshua would have done that, he wouldn't have lost 36 valiant men, and he wouldn't have had an embarrassing situation at Ai. And Ai got cocky when Joshua came back the second time after Joshua had taken care of issues and had prayed. And he went back and they wiped out Ai. Ai said, oh, let's go out and fight these guys again. We sent them running the first time. We'll send them running this time. They couldn't hear in the upper levels the army of God marching alongside of Joshua. It's not just good enough to take one step into the promise. It's not good enough just to take 2 steps in the promise. It's not good enough to take 3 steps in the promise. What's good enough is when you conquer the enemy and you take the land. You know, there's always a learning curve. Always a learning curve. But you know what? We can do it. We've got the same God that Joshua and David and Peter and Paul had. And the same God that fought with them will fight with us. Cindy preached last week, getting out of your comfort zone. You know what we do is we get out of our comfort zone, Sister Cindy, and sometimes we create a new comfort zone. That's what happened. Think of it. The Baptists said, well, babies shouldn't be baptized at birth. They need to be immersed. And so we got to baptism, and the Methodists said, well, you know, we don't have this. And each group came along, and instead of building and keep building, what happened was there kept being a separation, and someone kept moving forward, and they would take another step, and all of a sudden when they took that step, they'd sit there and camp. They wouldn't go on to the next step. Pretty soon someone would get the revelation and then move on to the next step, and they'd move on to the next step. And I believe that the apostolics have kind of been one of those things that we sit there at that step, and God is saying, you got another step to take. And he's not looking for another division in the church. He's looking for the church begin to move all together. And finally, if you read the end of Joshua, they had conquered all the territory. And Joshua began to divide up the territory to the children of Israel. We're so tickled to death when a baby takes its first step. Then we get tickled to death when the baby takes 2 steps. And then we get terrified. We start getting baby gates. We don't want them going up steps. We don't want them going down steps. We don't. We start going around and putting the things into the walls for plug safety, and we padding corners, and because they take off running and they don't see the flat area of the table and they run right into it. And we go out and we baby proof all of the cabinets on the sink so they can't open up the doors. And we have a hard time opening up the doors, and
they don't.
They don't. But God is saying, it's time. You take first step, and you take the next step, and you take the next step, and you take the next step. And you conquer. You conquer. You conquer. And pretty soon, you have conquered what God has given you to conquer. Completely. But it's taken the next step. We've taken 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 8, 10 steps to what God has put into our heart. And I'm not talking about just from last week. I'm talking about from our ministries as a whole. My ministry didn't start last week. I got ordained. Oh boy. 1979, November. I guess I'm one of them old preachers. $42, 43 years. Be 43 in November. Yeah, 44, November. And I'm going to tell you what, my first message, I preached about halfway through, and I got so turned around and everything. The people, it was like I could feel their spirits, and I just closed up the book and went over and sat down. That was in a conference. It was for the youth thing of the conference. We went to the next conference and I was asked to speak, and I'm going, oh Lord, not again. And I went up and I got prayed for. I said, when they asked for people who wanted prayer, I went up and I got prayed for. I said, God knows what I need. And I can tell you what I preached on that night. I preached on the 4 lepers sitting outside the gate. Wow. Samaria was being starved out, and they went out and gathered the spoils. And I knew something had changed that night. Did I have struggles? You better believe it. Did I have to work through things? You got it. And do I still have to? You better believe it. And the thing is sometimes they get bigger and fiercer. But if we walk each step exactly what God has put in front of us, we will conquer the land. Let's stand. Conquering takes work. When David ran down, it says he ran to meet the giant, put a stone in the sling, slung it. When the giant fell, he didn't have a sword in his hand. I don't know how long this sword was and how big and how heavy it was of the giant. But he reached down and got the giant's sword, and I like this. He took the enemy's head off with his own sword. You brought this weapon out here to kill me, and I'm going to... Thing is this. We run to meet the foe, and we conquer. Sister Lynn, would you dismiss us?